was dead. To begin with, there is no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, and the undertaker. Yes, old Marley was dead. Scrooge was his sole executor, his sole friend, and his sole mourner. Scrooge and Marley were partners for I don't know how many years. Scrooge never painted out old Marley's name. There it stood years afterwards above the warehouse door. People new to the business sometimes called Scrooge Scrooge, and sometimes Marley. He answered to both names. It was all the same to him. A Scrooge, a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, clutching, covetous old sinner, hard and sharp as a flint. The cold within him froze his old features. He carried his own low temperature about him always. No warmth could warm him, or wintry weather chilled him. Nobody ever stopped him in the street to say with gladsome looks, "My dear Scrooge, won't you come and see me?" No beggars asked him for money. No children ever asked him what time it was o'clock. But what did Scrooge care? It was the very thing he liked, to edge his way along the crowded paths of life, warning all human sympathy to keep its distance. Now, once upon a time, of all the good days of the year, on Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat busy in his counting house. He had his door open so he could keep his eye upon Bob Cratchit, his clerk, who was copying letters. Scrooge had a very small fire, but the clerk's fire was so much smaller that it looked like one coal. Wherefore the clerk tried to warm himself at his candle, but not being a man of strong imagination, he failed. Now, into Scrooge's office came Scrooge's nephew, Fred. "Good morrow to you, Uncle. Merry Christmas." "Ah, humbug. What's Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills with no money? A time for finding yourself a year older and not 1 hour richer." "Well, Uncle, there are many things from which I have derived good, by which I have not profited. Christmas among the rest. I've always thought of Christmas as a good time, a kind, charitable, forgiving time. It is the only time I know of in the long calendar of the year when men and women seem by one consent to open their shut-up hearts freely and to look upon one another as if they really were fellow passengers through life, and not a separate race of creatures bound on separate journeys. So therefore, Uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold in my pocket, I feel it has done me good and will do me good, and I say God bless it. Ah, come, Uncle, dine with us tomorrow." "Dine with you? I'd rather see you in the bar." "But why, Uncle, why? I want nothing of you. I ask nothing of you. Why cannot we be friends? We've never had any quarrel to which I've been a party, and I'm sorry to find you so resolute. But I have paid my trial in homage to Christmas, and I'll keep my Christmas humor to the last. And therefore, Uncle, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year." His nephew left the room without an angry word. He stopped at the outer door to bestow the greetings of the season on the clerk, Bob Cratchit, who, cold as he was warmer than Scrooge, for he returned the greeting cordially. Scrooge overheard him and muttered to himself, "There's another fellow. 15 shillings a week and a wife and a family talking about a Merry Christmas. I'll retire to Bedlam." Now Cratchit, in letting Scrooge's nephew out, had let another gentleman in. He was a portly gentleman, pleasant to behold. He now stood in the office with his hat off. He had books and papers, and he bowed to Scrooge. "Scrooge and Marley, I believe. Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley?" "Mr. Marley is dead. Died 7 years ago this very night." "Oh, well, I have no doubt that his liberality is well represented by his surviving partner. At this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge, it is usually somewhat desirable that we make some slight provision for the poor and destitute who suffer greatly at the present time. Many thousands are in want of common necessities, sir. Many hundreds of thousands in want of common comforts.
Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses?
Plenty of prisons, and the workhouses are in operation, though I wish they were not. They scarcely furnish Christian cheer of mind and body, and therefore, Mr. Scrooge, a certain number of us are endeavouring to raise a fund to provide the poor with some meat and drink and means of warmth. We choose this time, amongst all others, because it is a time when want is keenly felt, and abundance rejoices. And so, Mr. Scrooge, what may I put you down for?
Nothing.
You wish to be anonymous.
I wish to be left alone, since you asked what I wish. I cannot help to make idle people merry at Christmas. I don't make merry myself. I have helped to support the institutions I have mentioned. Those who are badly off must go there.
Oh, many cannot go there, sir, and many would rather die.
Well, then let them die and decrease the surplus population. Well, it's not my business. It's enough for a man to know his own business and not interfere with the business of others. And mine occupies me constantly. Good afternoon.
At length, the hour of shutting up the counting house had arrived. With an ill will, Scrooge dismounted from his stool and tacitly admitted the fact to the expectant clerk, who instantly snuffed out his candle and put on his hat.
You want all day tomorrow, I suppose.
Well, if it's quite convenient, sir.
It's not convenient. And it's not fair. If I was to dock you half a crown for it, oh, you'd think yourself ill-used, wouldn't you? But you don't think me ill-used when I pay a day's wages for no work.
Oh, but it is only once a year, sir.
That's a poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December. Yeah, but I suppose you must have the whole day, but be here all the earlier the next morning.
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. And a merry... Yes, sir. Scrooge left the office with a growl. The office was closed in a twinkling. The clerk ran home to Camden Town as hard as he could to play at Blind Man's Bluff. Scrooge, he took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern, and having beguiled the rest of the evening with his banker's book, went home. He lived in a gloomy suite of rooms, which had once belonged to his deceased partner, Jacob Marley. Now, let it be borne in mind that Scrooge had not bestowed one thought on Marley since the mention of him that afternoon. So let any man explain to me how, when Scrooge put his key in the lock, he saw in the door knocker, without its undergoing any immediate change, not a door knocker, but Marley's face. Oh. And then the face vanished. How about it? He closed his door and locked it. Double locked it, which was not his custom. Thus secured against any surprise, he took off his cravat, put on his dressing gown, and sat down in front of the fire to eat his gruel. He threw his head back in his chair, and his glance happened upon a bell, an old disused bell that hung in the room. It was with great astonishment and surprise and inexplicable dread that as he looked at this bell, it began to swing. It swung so softly at first that it barely rang out a sound, but then it rang out loudly, and so did every bell in the house, and then they ceased together. And they were succeeded by a clanking noise deep down below, as if someone were dragging a heavy chain. It came up the stairs. It came towards the door. It passed through the door. It was the ghost of Jacob Marley. He was covered in chains that were drawn around him and hung down like a tail. And about the chains were heavy cash boxes and keys and padlocks and ledgers and deeds and heavy purses. all wrought in steel.
Oh, mercy! A dreadful apparition. What do you want with me? Who are you?
In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley. It is required of every man that the spirit within him should go abroad amongst his fellow men. And if that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to do so after death, doomed to wander the world and witness what it might have shared, but cannot share and turn to happiness. I wear the chains I forged in life. I made them link by link and yard by yard. Is its pattern strange to you? Or do you know the heavy chain you bear yourself? It was as full and long and heavy as this 7 Christmas Eves ago, and you have labored on it since. It is a ponderous chain. In life, my spirit never roved beyond the narrow limits of our money-changing business, but mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Mercy, benevolence, and charity were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business. Hear me. My time is short. I am here to warn you, Ebenezer, that you yet have a chance and hope of escaping my fate. You will be haunted by 3 spirits. Without their visit, you cannot hope to shun the path I tread. Expect the first when the clock strikes 1. Expect the next upon the next hour, the third upon the next, and look to see me no more. And remember what has passed between us.
The phantom vanished into the dark, bleak night. Scrooge followed him to the window and looked out. The air was filled with phantoms, wandering and moaning as they went. Every one of them wore chains, like Marley. Now, whether these creatures faded into the mist, or whether the mist enshrouded them, he could not tell. But their spirit voices and themselves faded together. And Scrooge leapt into his bed and fell asleep upon the instant. Now the clock tolled the hour in a deep, hollow, melancholy 1. A light flashed up in the room, and the curtains of his bed were drawn aside, and Scrooge found himself face to face with the unearthly visitor who drew them open. It was a strange figure. It was like a child, but not so like a child as like an old man. But it had no wrinkles on his face. It wore a tunic of purest white and held in his hand a branch of fresh green holly.
Are you the spirit that was foretold to me? But who and what are you?
I am the ghost of Christmas past, of your past, Ebenezer. Rise and walk with me.
The room vanished, and they found themselves in a field. Scrooge looked about and he said,
Hey, I was raised in this place. I was a boy here. Yes, Ebenezer. These are but shadows of things that have passed. They have no consciousness of us at all. The schoolhouse, you see, Ebenezer, is not quite deserted. A solitary child remains there still, neglected by his friends.
Yes, it is me. Poor boy. The door of the schoolhouse swung open, and a young girl came in. much younger than Scrooge. She hugged him and kissed him and called him dear, dear brother.
Oh, dear brother, you want to come home. Home for good and all, home forever and ever. Oh, brother, Father is so much kinder than he used to be. That home is like a heaven, and he sent me in a coach to fetch you, and you're to be a man and never have to come back here ever, ever again. But first, dear brother, we're to spend the whole Christmas time together. Oh, and have the merriest and happiest time of all. Come, dear brother, home, 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 dear brother.
Always a delicate creature, but she had a large heart. She died, I believe, a woman in childbirth, but the child lived. Yes, child lived. My nephew, Fred. They left the school behind them, and they were now in the busy thoroughfares of the city. It was plain enough that by the dressing of the shops that here too it was Christmas time again, but it was evening. The streets were lighted up. The ghost stopped at a certain warehouse door and asked Scrooge if he recognized it. I don't know it. Wait. Why, yeah, I was an apprentice here. Oh, look, it's old Fezziwig. Old Fezziwig alive again. Oh, there was an employer. And look, oh my, it's my bell. Scrooge saw himself again, but now he was older, and he sat with a woman who had tears in her eyes that were reflected in the light of the ghost of Christmas past. Ebenezer, our contract is an old one. When it was made, we were both poor and content to be so. You have changed. I've seen your nobler aspirations fall off one by one until that all-encompassing greed engrosses you. You are a different man. I release you from our contract with a full heart for the love of him you once were. Spirit, haunt me no longer. Take me from this place, Spirit. I can stand it no longer. Spirit! Scrooge was aware that he was terribly sleepy and drowsy. And he was aware also that he was back in his room. And he fell asleep upon the instant. Awaking in the middle of a prodigiously tough snore, and looking about the room, Scrooge felt he was restored to consciousness for that very special purpose of holding a conference with the second messenger, dispatched to him through Jacob Marley's intervention. As he lay upon his bed, a light flashed up in the room. He began to think that the source of this light might be the next room. So he crept over in his slippers and opened the door slightly and peeked in. But the room had undergone a surprising transformation. The walls and ceiling were so hung with living green that, well, it was like a forest. And there were berries and leaves that glistened in the light from the fireplace, that set up such a roaring blaze that fireplace had never known in Scrooge's time. And on the room, heaped on the floor, to form a kind of throne, were turkeys and geese and brawn poultry, great joints of meat, long wreaths of sausages, mince pies, plum puddings, barrels of oysters, red-hot chestnuts, oranges, luscious pears, and seething bowls of punch. Now, seated upon this throne was a gentle giant, and he wore a glowing torch that was shaped like a horn of plenty. Well, Scrooge came peeking around the door.
Come in! Come in and know me better, man! I am the ghost of Christmas present! You've never seen the like of me before, have you? Never seen my elder brothers, many of them here these later years? Never gone forth with them?
Scrooge, Scrooge, come in and know me better.
Ghost of the present time. Last night I went forth on compulsion. If you have aught to teach me, let me profit by it. The room vanished, and they found themselves in the city. The spirit led Scrooge to the home of Bob Cratchit, his clerk, who was being greeted by his wife. And how did Tiny Tim behave? Oh, as good as gold and better. You know, he thinks the strangest things. I mean, sitting alone by himself so much. He said to me on the way home that he'd hoped the people in church had seen him because he was a cripple. And he thought it might be pleasant for them on Christmas Day to remember who it was that made lame beggars walk and blind men see. Help, my dears, gather round. My dears, a Merry Christmas to us all. God bless us. God bless us, everyone, replied Tiny Tim. He sat very close to his father, Tiny Tim did, on his little stool, and Bob held his withered hand in his, for he loved the child, and he wished to keep him by his side and dreaded that he might be taken from him. Scrooge, with an interest he had never felt before, asked the ghost if Tiny Tim would live.
I see a vacant seat in the poor chimney corner, and a crutch without an owner, carefully preserved. If these shadows are not altered by the future, the child will die.
Spirit, say it is not so. Say, Spirit, that this might be changed by actions in the future.
Well, if he be like to die, he'd better do it and decrease the surplus population. Man, if man you be in your heart, forswear that wicked cat until you find out what that surplus is and who it is. For it may be in the eyes of heaven that you are less fit to live than millions like the child of this poor man.
Well, my dears, another toast. I give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast. Founder of the feast, indeed. Well, it would be Christmas when one drinks to the likes of such an odious, stingy, hard-hearted man as Mr. Scrooge. Well, you know he is, Bob. Who knows that better than you? Now, all right, I'll drink his health for your sake in the days, not his. Mr. Scrooge. Long life to him. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. He'll be very happy and very merry, I'm sure. Mr. Scrooge.
Well, this time the chestnuts of the jug went round, and by they had a song about a little lost child from Tiny Tim, who had a plaintive little voice and sang it very well indeed. They were not a handsome family. They were not well dressed, but they were happy and grateful and pleased with one another and contented with the time. And as they faded, it looked happier yet in the bright sprinkling of that ghost's torch. Scrooge had his eye upon them, and especially on Tiny Tim. Now Scrooge and the spirit went along many streets, and the brightness of the roaring fires in kitchens and parlors was quite wonderful to behold. And it was a great surprise to Scrooge for him to find himself in a bright, dry, gleaming room with the spirit smiling at his side and looking at Scrooge's nephew, Fred, with approving affability.
Then my uncle said that Christmas was a humbug, as I live. Well, he's a comical old fellow, yes, and not as pleasant as he might be. But his offences carry their own punishment, and I'll not say a word against him. Oh, he's rich enough. Yes. But what good's his money? He does nothing with it. He doesn't make himself comfortable with it.
He doesn't have the pleasure of knowing that he's going to benefit us with it.
Oh, I am sorry for him. Oh, truly, with all my heart.
what are the consequences of his actions? I mean, here he takes it into his head to dislike us. He won't come and dine with us. He won't make merry with us. And what's the consequence? Well, he misses some very pleasant moments that could do him no harm at all. Well, he has given us a few pleasant moments here, hasn't he? Yes, and it would be ungrateful of us not to drink his health. And so, my friends, I give you my Uncle Scrooge. A Merry Christmas to the old gentleman and a Happy New Year. He wouldn't take it from me, but may he have it nevertheless. Uncle Scrooge! Yes, come, let us play some games. But the whole scene passed off in the breath that was spoken. And he and the spirit were again upon their travels. Much they saw and far they went. Many homes they visited, but always with a happy end. And then, from the foldings of his robe, the ghost showed Scrooge 2 children, which knelt down below him, held onto his garment.
Look you here, Scrooge. These children are man's. This boy is ignorance. This girl is want. Beware them both and all their kind, but mostly beware this boy. Oh, Scrooge, I can see it in your face. Have they no resource? Have they no refuge? And I would ask you, Scrooge, are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses? Are there no prisons? No workhouses?
The phantom disappeared. And now a new phantom appeared before them. It was shrouded in a deep black garment that left nothing visible save for one outstretched hand. Scrooge knew that this was the last of the spirit visitors sent to him by Jacob Marley. They were led to an obscure part of town. A woman came into this shop of an old gentleman named Old Joe, nearly 70 years of age. Scrooge and the Phantom came into the presence of the man just as the woman with the heavy bundle slunk into the shop and threw down her package.
Well, every man has a right to take care of himself. Oh, he always did. Oh. Well, who's the worse for the loss of a few things like he's not a dead man, I suppose? Well, if he wanted to keep him after he was dead, he should have been more natural when he was alive. Then he would have had somebody there with him when he was gasping out his last breath, instead of being there alone, by himself. Yeah, that's a judgment on him, it is. Hello, Joe. Tell me what the value of it is.
Well, she would be held here. 2 silver teaspoons, silver sugar tongs, 1 pair of old worn boots, some towels and sheet. What's this? Bed curtains? Well, you don't mean to say you took them down rings and all with him lying there, do you? Oh, well, you were born to make your fortune, yes, indeed, and you will, too. Well, here's the end of it, you see. He frightened everybody away when he was alive, to profit us by it when he was dead.
But, Spirit, I see the case of this poor man might be my own. My life tends that way now. But, Spirit, this is a dreadful place. Spirit, take me elsewhere. Show me some tenderness connected with the death.
The Phantom took them to the home of Bob Cratchit, whom they had visited earlier, in, of course, Scrooge's presence. Bob Cratchit was just walking into the house, and he approached his wife and children.
Oh, my dears, I saw Mr. Scrooge's nephew, Fred, on my way home, and he noticed I looked a little, just a little down, and he asked what was wrong. I told him. He said, "Oh, Bob, I'm sorry for it, and so sorry for your good wife." It was really as if he had known our Tiny Tim and felt along with us. My poor child.
The Phantom conducted Scrooge to a churchyard and stood amongst the graves. And he pointed to one solitary gravestone.
Spirit, before I draw nearer to that stone, tell me, are these the shadows of things that will be, or shadows of things that may be only? Men's courses will come to certain ends, but if those courses be changed, won't those ends be changed as well? Will you not tell me it's so with what you show me, Spirit? Will you not speak? Spirit, I see on this stone my own name, Ebenezer Scrooge. Oh, Spirit, Spirit, I am not the man I was. I will not be the man I must have been. Why show me this if I am beyond all hope? Oh, Spirit, Spirit, I am changed. I will keep Christmas in my heart all the year long. I will live in the past and the present and the future. Their lessons I will not shun. Oh, Spirit, say I may wipe away the writing on this stone.
Raising his hands in a last plea to have his fate reversed, Scrooge noticed a change in the phantom. Its shape changed and dwindled down into a bedpost. And the bedpost was his own. And the bed was his own. And the room was his own. And best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own to make amends in.
I'm alive and Holy Spirit, I will keep Christmas in my heart. I will live in the past and the present and the future. The spirits within them will strive within me. Oh, Jacob Marley at the Christmas time be praised. I don't know what to do. I'm as light as a feather.
I'm as happy as an angel.
I'm as merry as a schoolboy.
I'm as giddy as a drunken man. Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy New Year. New Year? I don't know what year it is. I don't know what day it is. I don't know anything. I'm quite a baby. I'd rather be a baby. What to do? Oh, glorious. Oh, beautiful day. Oh, hello there. Oh, my young fellow. Hello. Yes, hello, my young fellow. Yes, what day is today? No, wait, what day is today, my young fellow? Christmas Day. Christmas Day? I haven't missed it. The spirits have done it all in one night. Oh, well, of course they can do anything they want. The spirits. Oh, yes, my good fellow. Hello, young fellow. Yes. Tell me, do you know the poulterers in the next street but one? Oh, what an intelligent boy. Oh, yes, marvelous boy. Yes. Tell me, do they still have the prize turkey hanging there? Oh, the great big one, not the little prize turkey, but the great big one? Oh, they do. Oh, what a marvelous boy. Wait, go and buy it. Oh, no, I am in earnest. No, really, go and buy it. Bring the man back, and I'll give you a shilling. Come back in 5 minutes, I'll give you half a crown. What a marvelous boy. I'll send it to Bob Cratchit. He won't know who sent it. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim.
Oh, Scrooge shaved, and he dressed, and he finally got out into the street. And people by this time were pouring forth, as they had seen with the ghost of Christmas present. And walking with his hands behind him, with an irresistible smile on his face, many people came up to him and said, "Merry Christmas, sir, and a Happy New Year to him." And in years to come, Scrooge said that was the most marvelous sound he had ever heard in his ears. Now, he had not gone far when coming towards him was a portly gentleman, the same gentleman who had come into his office the day before to ask money for charity. Oh, how do you do? Yes, it's a Merry Christmas to you. Yes, no, it is I. It is Mr. Scrooge. Yes, I'm sorry, I beg your pardon. And, sir, I do hope you were successful yesterday. And would you do me the good favor, sir, of taking for your charity from me a sum of, no, make it,
Oh, no, I am in earnest, sir, really. Oh, there are a great many back payments in there, sir. Yes, will you come and see me? Yes, you will. Oh, bless you, sir. Thank you, sir. Oh, Merry Christmas!
Scrooge went to church. And he walked the streets and watched the people hurrying to and fro, patting little children on their head, and questioned beggars, looked down into kitchens of houses and up into windows, and found that everything could yield him pleasure. He had never dreamed that any walk, that anything could give him so much happiness. In the afternoon, he turned his steps towards his nephew's house. He must have passed the door a dozen times. And finally, he got up the courage, made a dash for it, and went up and knocked.
Fred, Merry Christmas. It is I, your Uncle Scrooge. I come for dinner. Fred, will you let me in?
Let him in. He almost shook off his arm in shaking his hand. Oh, Scrooge had the most wonderful time. Wonderful unanimity. Wonderful party. Wonderful games. Wonderful happiness. But Scrooge was early at the office the next morning. Oh, he was there early. If he could only catch Bob Cratchit coming late. Oh, that was the thing he wanted. The clock struck 9. No Bob. 9:15. No Bob. Bob was a full 18 and a half minutes behind his time. Scrooge sat with his door wide open so that he could see Bob come in. Well, Bob's hat and scarf were off before he even got into the office, and he ran to his desk and was scribbling away with his pen, trying to catch up to 9 o'clock.
Hello? What do you mean by coming here this time of day? Come here, sir. Now, sir, we're not going to take this any longer. No, sir, not any longer. And therefore, Bob Cratchit, I am going to raise your salary. Merry Christmas, Bob! Oh, merrier Christmas than I have ever given you. Oh, yeah, oh, no, I'm fine. Yes, Bob, I will raise your salary, and I'll help your struggling family, and we will discuss your affairs this very afternoon over a Christmas ball, eh, Bob? Now, build up those fires, and you go out and you buy another coal scuttle before you dot another eye, Bob Cratchit. And Merry Christmas.
Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all, and infinitely more, and to Tiny Tim, who did not die. He became a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, as good a man as the good old city or town or borough in the good old world ever knew. And it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas. If any man alive possessed the knowledge, may that truly be said of us all. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone.